I actually have a long history of being involved in so-called development since early childhood, and this was also because I grew up during a very exciting period in the history of South Africa, during the struggles against apartheid, which was steeped in building mass community organizations as part of the struggle against apartheid. And within that, as that process evolved, we recognized that it also dovetailed with significant shifts in the world system, and that technologies, in fact, were catalyzing huge shifts in the global economic system. And at the time, I was also a trade unionist, and a big part of the work that I've been doing was about looking how technologies were shifting the workplace, and how, therefore, as trade union organizations, we had to organize differently. And it was then when I realized that it's very, very important to recognize that we as development practitioners need to come to terms with how this very rapidly growing dynamic that's shifting systems is panning out, and also what role we could play as practitioners in redirecting this catalytic role that technologies are playing towards a developmental objective. And at the time I decided also at a very crucial point that it's important to learn consciously and very deliberately about this. So I pursued a master's in science and technology policy at Sussex University, where I began to learn even more about notions around appropriate technology and what a catalytic role it can play to empower communities, build community organizations, and in fact strengthen people and the ability to learn. And I think that for me was a huge aha moment, and it was then when I decided that my role as a development practitioner should be linked to this idea that technologies can in fact shift the way people see themselves, especially under conditions of resource-poor environments where women and youth and children are severely disempowered. And I was most intrigued by the role that technologies can play, particularly in self-development, in the development of people, and that is the part that I'm most passionate about as well. So, and it is on that basis that I began as part of the first generation really in Africa in developing organizations that consciously used the thesis that new information and communication technologies can enable the development of individuals, their personal development, their spiritual development, their emotional growth, and the development of organizations and communities, and by so doing society and the economy. And I think it's still a hypothesis. That's the important thing. We are still learning, and that for me is perhaps the most crucial issue, that it's essentially an emergent process. It's not, there is no blueprint out there. And so what I've had to begin to learn is how does one work with something that's only emerging, and catalyze conscious learning about how best to apply the technologies in a development context. Now, there are lots of wonderful anecdotal evidence about how it empowers communities and how it empowers individuals, which is very inspiring, but there are also many, many examples of abysmal failure. And I think that I find most intriguing about how we learn to come to terms with the failures and live with them. Not just push them aside as if we will never fail, because I think that's a wrong assumption, but particularly to learn that because this is a rapidly changing catalytic thing that shifts the entire system within which we're operating, that we need to come to terms with how those changes are catalyzed. You know, I think it's a common refrain. You go to any conference on ICTs for development or ICTs in education these days, and people will say it's not about the technology, it's about the pedagogy, it's not about the technology, it's about how you develop the communities with them, etc. The thing is, it is about the technology and it is also about how the technology is placed within a given cultural, social context, within given institutions, and the individuals within those institutions. So it can never be just the technology. And when I talk about having multiple perspectives, it's not just different viewpoints of different people, but to have the perspective of a technological intervention, as well as the perspective of the cultural, the social, the institutional, the political, as well as the individual insight. And it is that combination. I think, you know, there's a person called Joseph Schumpeter who talks about creative combinations, and it's about recognizing the creative combinations between the technologies where it is situated within given social and political and cultural contexts. So I wouldn't say that it's not about the technologies either, but I think it's very important to recognize that the technology is situated as an enabler within a given context, and that context includes organizations and individuals, and it's that combination. And often the institution hasn't made the shift, but the technology is to advance for the institution, or the individuals in the institutions haven't made the shift, where the failure happens. And then along with a whole host of other dynamics which we cannot see, and that's the key thing, is this notion of, even without the technologies, an idea isn't a fix either, or an individual wouldn't be a fix, or an organization wouldn't be a fix, not in a social setting, which is usually what education systems are about. And I found the reference to education transformation as being a wicked problem. Wicked meaning highly complex challenge that is also emergent in one's dealing with addressing the problem. And I'm loath to use the word solutions, because it comes from the technology discourse as well, that there's I've got a technology solution, but do we understand the problem? And an interesting Einstein said that if he was asked a question, he would spend 99% of the time figuring out the meaning of the question and understanding the problem, and the other time, the rest of the time we'll spend trying to answer the question. And I think that's the key thing, is we need to ask more questions. We need to be more open to talking about understanding the problem that we're trying to address, the nature of its wickedness, and then to share different views, surface different views on dealing with the wickedness, but not on the assumption that we'll have a solution.